Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. It's Nurse Lily's here and I am back with another video. So today I'm doing another sit down for you guys, and I decided to do a video on working in the public sector versus the private sector as a nurse in South Africa, as a registered nurse specifically. Okay, so what motivated me to do this video is, I think some time ago on my Instagram I did like a poll or a question tag thing, and I asked people what videos they would like me to do or what content they would like me to do this year of 2023. And someone said, let me do a video comparing the private sector versus the public sector in terms of working there as a professional nurse in South Africa. So that's why I'm doing this video. So if you are a student nurse and you are about to get into the nursing career and you want to try and find out where you would like to work or which environment will be more suitable for you, or you're already in the working field and perhaps you're in the public sector and you're thinking of making a jump into the private sector, then this video is for you. So if you enjoy this video, please do give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the notification bell so that you don't miss out whenever I post a video. And also, very, very important, you guys, if you enjoy this video, please leave a comment, okay? So, just a young disclaimer before I get started with this video. Everything that I'm going to be telling you guys in this video is based off of my own personal experience, okay? So, just to give you guys a bit of context, I graduated and I did my community service in the government sector, which is the same for everyone, right? And then I stayed in the government sector. And I stayed there for 3 years, 4 months, yeah. And then after that, I decided to leave the public sector and start working in the private sector. So, so that's where I started off, and now I'm in the private sector. So I feel like I am at a position where I can share my experience and just tell you guys how it has been for me and what I have learned and what I have realized. So without wasting time, let us get right onto this video. Okay, so every now and then I'll just be glancing at my notebook because I obviously made some notes so that I can stay on track with everything that I am talking about. So please don't mind me if I start to look down here and there. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so one of the things that I can mention about working in the public sector versus the private sector. So, working in the public sector, most of us who studied nursing, we start our careers in the public sector. And I think that that's a great thing to start in the public sector. What I'd like to say about starting off your career in the public sector is that it's absolutely a great thing to start in the public sector because you get to learn more in the public sector. And everybody knows and understands when you are doing your ComServe that you are still new, you don't have everything figured out, you are still learning, you're still building your skills and your experience. So everyone is understanding towards you. And everywhere you are placed when you are in your ComService, or even, mostly like when you are in your ComService, you'll probably be rotated. Whether you are in a clinic or in a hospital, you'll be rotated according to the different environments. They know that you are learning. They know that you are still growing. So they do give you that allowance. They don't expect too much from you, and they allow you to grow and learn. And it's a healthy learning environment with no one putting pressure on you or having like high expectations. And it's a positive learning environment basically. So that's one thing about starting your career off in the public sector or being in the public sector. I think even when you change your job in the public sector, because I did my ComServe at one clinic 1 year, and then the following year I stayed in that clinic. And I rotated through the different departments, and I got an opportunity to learn a lot, you guys. And I even got an opportunity to work independently and run the program myself. So that was really nice for me. I really enjoyed that. Because now I even had an opportunity to prove myself, which was great. I mean, if you're running your own antenatal program or you're running the baby clinic, then that's amazing because people can see your work ethic, and you just get to be appreciated, and you also get to have that confidence, and it just ups your self-esteem. So it does wonders for you. So after I left that clinic, after 2 years of working there, then I went to work at a labor unit. And that's where I worked for 1 year, 4 months, till the time when I left now and went into the private sector. So I was in the public sector for 3 years, 4 months. And even there, when I changed my job, because now I moved from that small clinic into another clinic, but now at a 24-hour labor ward. I had a chance there as well. I was orientated. So you get a chance, you either get orientated for like a month, or depending on how busy it is and how much they need staff, maybe you can be orientated for like 2 weeks. But you get a chance to do orientation, to get yourself used to that environment. And not to say that you won't be working independently while you're being orientated, but it's time to learn. It's time to adjust, and everybody understands that you are still new, you're still getting used to the place. So, yeah, that's how things work in the government sector. You learn a lot, you can rotate through different departments, and I like the fact that it's a place that you can learn and grow at. Now, when it comes to the private sector, my experience was that I got into the private sector. So it's a completely new environment for me. Everything is different in the private sector, guys. Sure. And especially if you haven't worked in a hospital environment where you need to work with the doctors and follow out doctors' orders and things like that. It's a different thing. Even the equipment, guys, in the private sector is different. Simple things like IV lines are different. The medication and the drugs that are used in the private sector are totally different to what's used in the public sector, especially also, again, if you haven't worked at a hospital in the public sector. So it can be quite a huge shock, and especially if you're going to private. So it can be quite a huge shock, and make the whole transition very, very difficult. So I think what I would advise people here with this one is that if you want to work in a hospital setting in the private sector, start off in the public sector, build your skills, build your experience, and then go and work in the public sector in a hospital setting as well. Then only after that move to the private sector, and then you can go and work in the private sector. It's going to be a much more smoother transition, but you cannot be fully prepared because, as I said, everything is different. The equipment is different in the private sector, and the drugs that are used are totally different. And now you get to work with brand names and no more drugs that are named according to their active ingredients, which is what you learned at school. But now when you are in the private sector, now you need to learn brand names, and you need to learn generics, generic combination drugs, and it's like a whole lot. So yeah, I would advise, if you want a bit of a smoother transition, start in the public sector, build yourself, gain your skills, and then go into the private sector now after being in the public sector. And obviously, this will not apply to everyone. Other people who probably just jumped straight into the private sector after ComServe probably had a smoother transition. It will not be the same for everyone, but for me personally, it took a lot of adjusting on my side. So yeah, that's what I can say about this one. Okay, when it comes to the salary now, let's get on to the second point. The salary in the public sector, the money is not great. I'm going to be completely honest with you. The money is not great in the in the public sector. Yeah. Where I was working, when I was a PN in the public sector, I was getting, I think, 21,000 something, 21,700 take home, I think thereabout. And then when I got into, okay, so 21,000 something, 22,000 thereabout. And then there are some allowances. I remember during the time of COVID, we had like 1,000 Rand allowance, COVID relief allowance. And then after deductions, that amount goes down to, depending on what you have, whether you're on medical aid, whether you have like a housing allowance, maybe it will go down to like around 17K. 17,000, 16,000. It depends on a whole lot of different factors, whether you are paying medical aid, how many people are on that medical aid, do you have any deductions that are coming off from your salary? For example, I had NSFAS at the beginning of my working career, which I later realized that I wasn't supposed to have NSFAS because I was on a bursary actually. But anyways, we're not on that right now. So it depends. It will not be the same for everyone, guys. But I just really want to be honest with all of you so that if you are even thinking of getting into nursing, you know what to expect. So the money is not low. The money is not great and it's very low, guys. Nurses are like the lowest paid people. But I personally believe that nurses are like the people that work the most in the hospital setting, and they really just do so much for patients. But nurses are not recognized. No one cares about nurses. No one values nurses. So nurses are the lowest paid. So yeah, it is what it is. So okay, so now let's look at the private sector. Private sector, it's really, really good. The pay is way better than in the public sector. Of which is one of the things that I think a lot of people will end up leaving the public sector for and start to go and work for like private companies, NGOs, and the private hospitals as well because of the money, guys. Because I even started thinking to myself that, you know what, probably government hospitals are just meant for people who are starting out, hey? Like people who are still juniors. It's not a place where you can stay forever because the money is really poor and the cost of living is very high, guys. And we all want to have a decent living. You want to own a car, you want to own an apartment or a place someday and not rent forever. So it makes it very, very difficult if you're now working on such a low salary. But okay, then you get into the private sector. Private sector, because from government posts that I've seen, usually nurses, and there's this thing of grades with nurses. Grade 1, you are a grade 1 PN or grade 2 PN. And I think grade 1 PN, you are in that level up until you have 10 years of experience as a nurse type of thing. So only then you will get a bit of a like bump in your salary. Of which, guys, come on, in this economy that we are staying in, you are in that one salary bracket for like 10 years. It's so not realistic. I don't even know who actually came up with salaries for nurses. Like, who sat down and actually thought that we can pay nurses this much? Yeah, but anyways, it is what it is. So in the government sector, I had a bit of a big jump when I left, because so nurses usually, I think they get paid, if you're a registered professional nurse, I think you get paid in the public sector around 260,000 rand per annum to maybe 280, if I'm not mistaken. Please do not quote me on this, but it's around there, which translates to around 21,000, 22,000. I think they're about monthly before deductions. Then, so when I left and I went to the private sector, I'm not I'm not going to mention how much I got, but if we're looking at the government salary that I just mentioned now, my salary in the private sector, it went more than, I think 130,000 rand more. Addition, a 130,000 rand addition to what I was getting in the public sector. So that's a lot, you guys, because now that increases your take home amount. And where I worked, there was a special unit allowance because it was a maternity ward. So that increases what you're getting even more. So then you can just like imagine, it increases your monthly salary, like your gross, which is what you get before deductions, and then you get a bit more as well, which is after deductions. So after deductions, I was having a take home of more than 20,000 rand, which is, I think it's a bit of a better salary to work with. I think it's still a bit of like a junior salary, because you cannot get 20,000 rand forever, you guys. At some point, people want to have children, and at some point, you're gonna have to be paying school fees, and it's a lot. But I think while you are still single, you can work a bit with that kind of salary, because in that salary, you can pay for a car, you can even buy a house, you can get a bond. Not to say that when you are in the public sector you cannot buy a car. Obviously you can, but you'll really need to like be working on a very strict budget. And you, even while in the public sector, you can as well still get a bond. However, it needs to be on a very strict budget for obvious reasons. So basically, in terms of like money, definitely the private sector pays better, and it also matters which hospital you are. So these private hospitals, they don't pay the same. So one hospital pays more than the other hospitals. So take that into consideration as well when you are thinking of moving, and in terms of like choosing which company or which hospital you're going to work for. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about when it comes to working for public sector versus the private sector, there's a low opportunity for growth when it comes to the public sector, especially if you're going to stay in a hospital or like a clinic. So it's either you're a professional nurse, or you are like a unit manager, or you're an assistant manager. So those are the ranks basically. And it takes very, very long for you to actually get to the point where you can become a unit manager in the public sector. Because I've seen some of the posts that they advertise in the public sector, and most of the unit manager posts that they advertise in the public sector, usually they will say that the requirement is you need to have a minimum of 10 years experience as a registered nurse after registration with SANC, blah, blah, blah. So guys, 10 years. Think about it. If you started working when you were 22, you graduated after you were 22, you're going to finish 10 years when you are 32. And you're only going to have a bit of a salary increase after 10 years, guys. By that time, probably you would have been married, you would have started having kids, and only then can you qualify for a managerial position. Whereas in other industries, like in the corporate sector, you can work for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and you can become a manager. You can get maybe what is it, a junior manager or what, assistant manager position after like 5 years, especially maybe if you've been like in the same company and you've just climbing the corporate ladder like that. So it's very difficult in nursing. You just gonna stay a registered nurse, especially if you're at a hospital. There's not a lot of opportunities to grow, and there's no climbing the ladder. There's no ladder to climb, basically. And yeah, so that's it. When it comes to the private sector, okay, there's a bit of a ladder that you can climb. So you can have a normal RN position, and then you can be a second in charge in the ward or in the unit, and you can become a unit manager. And now also, outside of just working in the ward, in the hospital, you have other opportunities. You can become a clinical training specialist. Maybe you get employed by the agencies, and then you're the one who's in charge of making sure that agency staff has all of their competencies in order, and you are the one who's responsible for those kind of things and the trainings and all of that. Or you can, if it's like maybe a hospital that has like an institution for nursing students as well, then maybe you can get something there as a clinical training specialist for the students, something like that. So basically what I'm trying to say is, and I think in the private sector, you don't have to wait 10 years to become a second in charge of a ward. If you know the place, you've worked there, you know the work, you have the experience, probably after 5 years, you can become a 2IC. So, or you can become a night supervisor. In the private sector, you see more young people taking on senior roles. So there's a lot more opportunity to grow and a lot more opportunity to make more money and. So yeah, that's the nice thing about being in the private sector as well. And then another thing that I wanted to talk about now, this is point number 4. When it comes to the independence, the nice thing about working in the public sector is that you can be quite independent, especially if you've worked in a clinic setting. You can be very independent in the clinic setting. If you are doing antenatal care, you are the midwife, you are seeing the clients, you're doing everything, you're working independently. You are the one who's taking care of them. If there are any complications, you refer to the next level of care, which is a hospital. But everyone that's having basic antenatal care is under your care, and you deal with them and you do everything. And then also, if you're working in a MOU or a clinic that has a labor ward like I worked in, you're also responsible for that lady or that mom who is in labor. You take care of them and you do everything for them. And if only when there are complications do you refer to the next level of care, which is the hospital. So it's nice because you can work independently, and especially as if you are someone who likes to control things to the T and you're a perfectionist and you like to implement new things, then it's nice. You can do that while working in the government sector. Then so you have an opportunity to make decisions, and that's really, really nice. However, when you are working in the private sector, especially as a midwife, your independence is very limited, because that pregnant woman is the doctor's client. It's the gynae's patient, not yours. So the doctor is the one that gives the orders for everything. And whether they are low risk or high risk, because in the government sector, the women will come to the hospital. In fact, it's only high-risk patients that are seen to start with in the hospital setting. So it makes sense that the gynae will be the one that's in charge of that patient's care. And as a midwife, you are just taking care of the mom, and you monitoring everything. You report whatever complications or abnormalities to the gynae. It makes sense because it's high risk clients, and gynaes are specialists that are trained to work with high risk pregnancies. Okay. However, when you get to the private sector and you work in a maternity ward, now you see high risk and low risk patients. Okay. But even with the low risk patients, that patient is not your patient. It's the gynae's patient. So everything that happens and how it happens, it is according to the gynae's preferences. Yes, depending on where you are and the kind of gynaes that you are working with, you can voice out your opinions for certain things. But if you're working at a place where there's like the teamwork is really lacking, then yeah, things are more or less gonna go according to what the gynae wants. So then there's no independence. You don't have that independence. No decision making. Your role is very limited in the decision making as well. So yeah, if you are someone that likes to work independently and you like to use your own experience and knowledge and skills, it's going to be very tough for you in the private hospital, because in the private hospital, the gynae is the one that is in charge. But if you're in a public hospital or in a public clinic, then that's the place where you are just going to flourish. You are going to flourish. So yeah, that's one other thing. And then the fifth point that I want to make, that's also related to the fourth point, is that in the government sector or the public sector, you grow. You're going to grow in your knowledge, you're going to grow in your skills, but there are limitations as well to your growth, because as I said, in the government sector, even when it comes to like the drugs that are used in the government sector, very limited, because the government sector looks at their budget and they get tenders for the drugs according to the more affordable ones. In the private sector, all sorts of drugs that you learned in your pharmacology, you will be exposed to them in the private sector. All the drugs that you learned about in your pharmacology, you'll get to know them once you start working in the private sector, because in the private sector, everything goes according to the money. So the money is there, money is not a problem, so you get exposed to a lot. However, you still grow a lot more in the public sector, because especially like when you're new to a job, there's an understanding that you're still new and people orientate you properly and they have that patience with you. That's one thing that I noticed where I worked in the private sector, that that kind of patience and really showing you the ropes and, you know, just creating that conducive learning environment, I feel like I didn't have it where I worked. And people just didn't understand that we come from different backgrounds and different environments, and where I used to work, probably we did things differently, you know. There was this expectation that everywhere things are done the way that they are done there, which was really just not the case, and it doesn't even make sense to have that assumption. But anyways, so that's one thing that I noticed. And then another thing is that you can lose some of your skills if you're working in the private sector. So let me just make like one example. Depending on which hospital you are in, there might not be a lot of like natural births and natural deliveries that are done in that hospital. When you work in the public sector and you are a midwife there, all those babies, you're going to deliver them. Especially if you're in a clinic like I did, all the moms who come in who are in labor, you are going to deliver that baby. You're going to help that mom to deliver that baby. In the private sector, since I said the mom is the gynae's patient. The gynae is the one that is going to deliver that mom's baby. Okay, so because now you might not be doing a lot of births, you'll lose your skills. However, okay, you'll be able to monitor the labor, and you have to report everything to the gynae. But also, I think also depending on which hospital you are in, the gynae might also want to come periodically in to check the mom, and they want to do their own assessment. So you might not be able to really fully progress that mom by yourself, and make your own decisions and judgments, obviously in collaboration with the gynae. So some of your skills you lose them because you're not using them. Okay, so a lot of the things that I learned when I was still in the public sector, like the births, inserting contraceptive devices, all the hand skills that I learned, I lost them, or forgot a lot of them because now I'm not doing those things anymore. And also another thing, in the private sector, there's a high rate of cesarean sections. So you'll find that depending on where you are working, there might not be a lot of natural deliveries or natural births that they do in a month. So you're very limited in the number of births that you can do. So there's a lot, guys. There's a lot. So you really need to think deeply about everything and consider all of the facts before you change or you switch. Yeah. But there are pros and cons, as you guys can probably see by now. Pros and cons of being in the public sector, pros and cons of being in the private sector. And at the end of the day, you just need to weigh everything and make a decision that will suit your needs. So, lastly, one thing that I just want to mention, and this might not be the case for everyone, guys, but even when I remember from when I was a student, working in a hospital setting with doctors, it was a pleasant experience back then, in the hospital setting in public. Great relationship between the nursing staff and the doctors. Amazing, great. One thing that I learned in the private sector was that, but this one can also be highly influenced by which hospital you are at. I didn't feel that relationship between the nurses and the doctors. I felt like there was such a huge gap between the nurse and the doctor. There's a hierarchy system that I noticed where I used to work. Doctor is up here, nurse is down here, and there's no great working relationship between the two, which I felt was very, very sad, because in order for us to give great care to this mom or to this woman, it's nice when we're all working together and we can all collaborate with our different ideas and, everything is just great. But there are literally some hospitals in the private sector where the doctors really look down on nurses, and even in terms of how they treat them, and even in terms of embarrassing nurses in front of patients. So the relationship is just so absent, and it's so disappointing, guys. It is really, really so disappointing and so disheartening, but highly also dependent on the specific hospital that you are working. Now that I've been freelancing, I've gotten an opportunity to work at different hospitals, and I've realized that it's actually not all the hospitals where it's like this, and the doctor-nurse relationship is just terrible. So it does depend on where you are working. So yeah, guys, basically that has been my experience. You might have a different experience, and that's totally okay, but this video was really based on my personal experience. But however, I hope that my personal experience can at least prepare you or help you to know what to look out for. I think it's also great when you know what to expect, you can prepare your mind even mentally. So I think yeah, hopefully this video is going to help someone out there. But yeah, there are benefits and disadvantages of working in either the public sector or the private sector. So as I said, it's just a decision that you need to make yourself, and according to what works for you and according to your expectations and what you need. So yeah, basically that is it, you guys. But yeah, I think I am happy that I've gone through my nursing career the way that I have, because I've gotten an opportunity to learn a lot and learn the different environments and be placed in like different environments that were able to like challenge me physically, intellectually, and even emotionally challenge me. So yeah, and one thing I know, I am still growing a lot. I am growing a lot, and I'm learning everywhere I go. And that's another thing that I've really enjoyed about my freelancing journey. I've gotten a chance to go to a lot of different places and learn a lot at different environments. So yeah, those are some of the things that you can think of and consider. Okay, so now lastly, someone asked me, how can we get into the private sector? So I just want to answer that question just in closing for this video. What I personally did when I wanted to move from the public sector to go to the private sector, I used LinkedIn and Pnet to apply for the posts, right? Guys, every day I was on Pnet, every day I was on LinkedIn looking at the next opportunity, and every day I was sending out my applications. I was editing my CV, making sure I have all of my things and skills and experiences up to date on my CV. And I was just sending out my CV every single day. I was looking at the post and what's available, because you might have looked at Pnet yesterday, and there might be a new post that they recently advertised. So that's what I would advise. You can use those platforms. I know and trust them, because I know I've applied for jobs on both of them and I've gotten something. I've gotten interviews, and I know from other people's experiences as well, even those who are not in the health industry or who are not in nursing, in corporate, LinkedIn, Pnet, your best friend, guys, if you are looking for a job. So make sure you have an updated CV, make sure you have good experience, and just apply. On LinkedIn, you can even reach out to the people who are advertising the jobs. You can even follow people who are in your specific field, and then you can get some tips from them as well. So it's a great platform. It's a really wonderful platform if you are a job seeker. So I highly advise that people who are seeking for jobs to look at those platforms. So yeah, guys, that's the end of this video basically, and I really hope that it helped you a lot. If you did learn something from this video, please do give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the notification bell so that you don't miss out whenever I post a video. And yeah, guys, if you are happy to share your experience, please do so in the comment section below. Tell us, what was your experience of working in the public sector? What has been your experience of working in the private sector? And what other tips can you give people out there who are looking to switch or change their jobs? So yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I cannot wait to see you guys on my next video. Bye.